They are soft. It's like heat and bond, but it doesn't make your piece stiff. So this is a really nice thing to use. The other, I didn't grab any SF 101, but I'll send Tammy out and she'll go get that for me. Right, Tammy?
Sure, if you introduce yourself again so that we actually get it on the recorded video and not the live video.
Oh, the recording. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maddie Coughlin. I have been doing wool applique probably for a good, I've been with Quilters Covered for 10 years. So probably 6 to 7 years I've been doing wool applique. My absolute favorite thing to do. It's just, so, you know, when I do a project, I get everything on my background and then I go sit in front of the TV or at a table or out in the backyard and stitch away.
This is what I was getting, right?
SF 101.
Oh, okay.
I have that out here.
Yeah, never mind.
I have it right here. So we are launching today this kit. And it is this ornament, this ornament, and this one. This one I'm going to take off. Actually, I can take them all off and show them around. With this one, I used some special sparkly pins. My girl's best friend, right? So I'll pass them around, you can see that. With these ones, you need a base, and it's the same with the little sweaters here. You have to have a base to put your pieces on. So when you cut it out, you're going to cut out two, one for the back, one for the front. When you're doing the one for the front, that's where you'll use the SF 101. This is like a heat and bond. It's very lightweight, and it allows you to cut out all your pieces, iron them on, it's good to go. You can sit and sew. This is SF 101. I only use SF 101 either on a stitchery like we did earlier, like on this one here. This is an embroidery with a lot of stitchery on it, the same as that one. This one up here with the geraniums, my background is Osnaburg. It's a hand-dyed Osnaburg. It is a loose weave, and the pattern originally called for wool, but wool is so expensive that change up your backgrounds. You don't have to do what the pattern says. So because I'm stitching on that, I want a stabilizer on the back. That way my fabric's not going to stretch because I don't use a hoop, and it stabilizes it so that this is Osnaburg. So at Christmas time we had, and there's the pattern there too, you can see it has a black background, and I thought, black, springtime? No, not doing that. So this actually was used in this project here. Again, she called for wool, and that would be way too expensive. Even my black is flannel, a black flannel. And I did it like a flip and sew when I put it all together. So I made a base, which would be the blue Osnaburg, and then I built on top of that. So anything that's wool would have the paper backing. Anything that's cloth is going to have the cloth backing, the SF 101. Shape Flex, I guess, is what the SF stands for. Another thing is, if your pattern does not say images reversed, and you don't mind things looking the other way, then go ahead and trace it the way it is. But if you want it to look like the pattern, it needs to be reversed because you're using a fusible on it, so you're only one side is good. When I did these, I have soft fuse on the back of just the front, everything on the front. I want to attach the back to it. I don't need to have a fusible or anything on the back of this one. So when I wanted to cut this one out, I used freezer paper. So freezer paper looks like this. It has a waxy side, which is paper on the other side. And so you trace your image on here, cut it out, and that, when you peel this off, there's no residue left on the wool, so both sides are good. So whatever side fits best, that's where you're gonna put it. But on some things, it has to be a certain way. Because when I did it's not here, I did a little Volkswagen, but I put SF 101 on the back of this, so only one side is good. And when I went to put it on my Volkswagen is actually this way. So I'll have to make another Volkswagen sometime, a beige one. Or what I would do then, I would use this as my foundation and just put another layer. Because this piece is really thin, this would just build it up and give it a little bit more stability. This is what the soft fuse is. Yes?
If I am appliquing wool onto flannel, do I have to put anything on the back of the flannel?
I would, because that you want to put the SF 101, the fabric one, because that would stop your flannel from stretching and, you know, becoming kind of warped. Yeah. So also, with this piece, I only have the SF 101 on the back of this blue piece, not on my flannel itself. Again, she used wool, but it's so expensive, so, you know, cut corners where you can. And so that allowed me to make this a flip and sew. Otherwise, I would have had to get two pieces, really, because you need this one and you need one on the back. Or you could just have this one, but then your edges are thinner, whereas everything else is a bit thicker.
Now, Maddie, are you, when you layer that, are you doing the black, and then you're doing a circle or an oval of blue, and then you're adding the white on top of that? Or is the blue just the sizing that you can see?
No, the blue is the whole
thing.
oval.
Okay.
What I did, though, was I can't remember how wide this is, but I did lay it on the black so that I knew I had about an inch or an inch and a half all the way around. That way I knew I had enough flannel. But I did just do this piece here. This does have the SF 101, and I hand stitched it. Yeah, that's hand stitched on, so it's appliqued onto this piece. So then this whole piece would have been finished. The other thing too is, in this pattern, for this snow here, she tells you how much you need for it, but it would go right across, so it's under things. Well, I didn't have that color in that big a piece, so I thought, well, you're not gonna see it here.
Right.
So just, you know, it only has to go under this piece, half an inch at the most. I usually do about a 1/4 inch. And that way, you know, I'm being economical, I guess, you know. What else can I tell you? You can, see, this one is done on cotton, and on cotton again. Osnaburg up there. This one, it's wool on homespun and a cotton. And, you know, like, embellish any way you want. You can add star buttons or birds or whatever. This one, it has hand applique cotton, so needle turn applique. The trees are done that way. And then the deciduous trees are done in wool. The snow is flannel. And the houses are actually sewn together on the machine, so I didn't have to hand stitch it and make sure there were no gaps, you know.
Is this from the primitive patterns or no?
It's in the meadow. You can build a snowman by, who did that one? I think
It
Norma Whaley.
It could be the colors you use, but
Because everybody in the class did different.
Yeah.
Some did all dark, some did all light, some had really bright colored houses. And that's the fun of a class, because everybody has their own taste in colors and fabrics that they want to use. Yeah, so this one, I was asked earlier about this one. Do we have this pattern? No, I made this up. I saw this house and these hills, and I thought, I love that. Everything I do almost has a house in it. I love houses. But it really, and also, these two fabrics are the same, but this is the back side of the fabric, and this is the front side.
Can you take this way and show us?
Yes, this is the back side, that's the front side. And these are homespuns. So these ones with a little bit of texture are Japanese homespuns, the same as this. Whenever I would go to shows, I would always look, like Creative Festival, I would look for Japanese homespuns. So I thought I'll incorporate a little bit of wool in here. And this was from another pattern that I had. I think it's from the one I hand colored, you know, the Snow Days, that's what it's called. And I just made them smaller. This is punch needle. Punch needle is a lot of fun too. So, and I found the square frame at a secondhand shop and put it in the frame. These are from this book, Christmas at Buttermilk Basin. This red, Trudy, I don't know if you recognize it, but it's from an old coat. It was the pocket in the coat that I got at the rug cooking. There are 3 different ones. These are the other 2. This is a great book too, so I'll pass that around if you want to have a peek. And we have lots of kits. Sheep in the middens. So some of these things are outside, just right there. And we've decided that, you know, wool has become so popular that not everybody has a collection of wool. So we decided we're gonna start kitting up things, because that way you have all the wool you need. We also have these bags. This is a great way to get started, because you get 40 pieces in here, all different colors. Some you get 2 of, some have textures in them as well. This is an Osnaburg bundle, and so that's what I had to get that color up there. And there's another piece out there that has a green one where I used it as a background. And actually, one of the ladies in my wool class, she was doing an oval mat with a truck, and it was with pumpkins and Halloween kind of things, and she was just using a cotton background, and she just cut it so it was all starting to fray. I told her, really, you should use SF-101 on the back, but then we came downstairs and we looked at other things, and she ended up using Osnaburg for her background, and it was kind of a green color. It just looked awesome with all of the fall colors that she had. There are so many books. We have toweling now as well. This is a pattern that is actually a runner. And when we got the toweling in, I thought, I've got to do something with the towels. So I thought, when this pattern came in, well, I saw it online, and then I thought, let's get this one. I just turned it into a pillow. So this is using 1 meter of the toweling. The first thing Sherry Jibb said to me, did you wash that? I went, no. Just should have washed it first. I think if I washed it first, it would just tighten up the weave a little bit, and it was quite large. I had to actually take it back home and sew up the sides a bit. So if you're gonna do that one, wash it first, and that would tighten it up a bit. Also with the runner, it tells you, you know, there's gonna be a truck at either end. So because it's a pillow, we only need the one, so it makes a nicer piece.
Talking about washing, can you wash any of these? Like, or are these more decorative things that sit on the wall?
For me, they're more decorative, but they can be washed. A good way to wash anything with wool is put it in the snow and pile the snow on it, right? That's how you do rugs. You would do it the same way. Or in a bath with cold water, but then how are you going to
Bring it out.
So, I don't know, I haven't washed any of them yet. Don't look close, okay, there might be dust. But, yeah, I haven't.
So even though that's the size of a quilt, you're really hanging it on the wall to
I
get
am,
the full
yeah.
effect of it.
For a whole, like, 2 months. But, you know, I could put it on my bed, it fits.
vacuum it or whatever.
Yeah, or take it on
Brush
the
it, brush and just.
Yeah, and brush
the
it, yeah, yeah. This one is actually my very first one that I did with wool. And the only wool in it is the bird, the hat, the earmuffs, and this hat with the band. Everything else is flannel. And it's, this is only 5.5 inches wide. I saw it in a Primitive Quilts and Projects magazine. They had it draped over a coffee table and it just looked really sharp. And when I made it, I thought, this is so small. So this border is, I don't know if you know the mitered placemats, the easy mitered placemats pattern. That's how I did this. So it has mitered corners here, but I didn't want it to be floppy, this edge. So I did iron it a little piece of Decker Bond all the way around, and then I brought my back to my front and mitered my corners and stitched it on. And it just gave it the body it needed.
Can you talk a little bit about the thread that you use for the applique process, and are there specific needles and how?
Yep. So the needles that I like, there are two. There's a number 8 embroidery needle and a number 24 chenille needle. The chenille one has a bigger eye, a little bit thicker needle itself, and I use that when I'm using the thicker threads, like the Valdanis, this type, or DMC pearl cottons. Or if I'm using maybe 3 strands of the just regular embroidery floss. When I stitch these, I use a lot of wool thread. And you want your thread to match whatever it is you're sewing to your background. If I don't have a thread in wool that matches, I'll use embroidery floss. I use 1 strand of embroidery floss. If I don't have an embroidery floss that matches it, I'll just use regular sewing thread. And again, it's thin, like a 50 weight, I've used that. Actually, I used it in this one here. I didn't have a peach color, so I just used a regular sewing thread. And that's where I would use the number 8 embroidery needle.
If you want it to be contrasty, like for an effect, do you use the thicker?
Yes, so in the regular cotton, pearl cottons, I would use a number 12 weight thread. If I'm doing embellishing, I haven't used it on this one, but then I'd like to go to a number 8 thread. It's a thicker thread, you're really gonna see your embellishment. See, even on here, I wouldn't have used a thick thread, so you're gonna know where a thick thread will look good. In here, that's where it would look good. Where you really want to see a contrast, that's where you would use a heavier thread. In that one I used 8 weight and 12 weight. I'm just trying to see if there's other things. Okay, so this one. This was a sample that I did just to show what the different things are on the back that I used. So this was a Heat and Bond light that I used on the back of my fabric. No, on the back of my wool. That's right, I just used SF101 on the back. This one, so when you're coming over here to check these out, it's what I've used on the wool part itself. So this is the regular Heat and Bond, this one is the Featherlight Heat and Bond, so it's not as stiff. This one is soft fuse, and this one is just freezer paper. So if you're using freezer paper, which is perfectly acceptable, The issue with that is that you either have to pin it down or you're going to use Roxanne's glue-based. And when you use Roxanne's glue-based, you're just doing a dot here and there. Don't put it too close to the edge, because when you stitch through that, it's really thick and heavy and hard to get your needle through. When I use soft fuse, I don't really have an issue with things coming up. But because these are really small, and you know, I'm just holding it in my hand, some corners may come up because of the repetitive use in that. That's where you would just use a little applique pin it down, or a dot of Roxanne's glue-based. Also in this one, French knots are usually 3 wraps around. If you want to see that snowflake, I just do 4. And on this one as well, I used a wool thread around the edge, but on the white one, if you got the white one, this one I used a pearl cotton. And in this one too, they used a little button here, but I had little bells. So make it your own, you know. Even your colors, they don't have to. This in the pattern is pink. I didn't want a pink bell, so I used yellow. Okay, any other questions? Do you have any other? There's so many books, yes.
Use a blanket stitch, do you?
Okay, I only use a blanket stitch on the outside edge. When I'm sewing a piece on, I use a whip stitch. So it's the same type when you're hemming, putting your binding on, so that kind of stitch. And that's where I would use 1 strand of embroidery floss, or I'd use a wool. Wool is nice. Wool is 12 weight, but because it's very fibery, it just blends right into the wool itself. So it looks like it's 1 strand. But I just find that the blanket stitch, when you're doing something little like this, that's all you're seeing is the thread itself. So I prefer to see the picture, and you know, I'll save my blanket stitch for the outsides.
Maddie, can I just see that for a second, because
Yeah.
I want to know on the back of it, I was thinking, I didn't see anything on the back, so, yeah, so everything, you're kind of going into the wool,
Yeah,
and you're not
that's
going in the
tricky.
back.
That's
And
very
I was
tricky.
thinking about that as you was talking, and I
Yeah.
thought, oh, so that's how she does it, okay.
Is there
So-
not 2 layers of wool?
Yeah, so she's going into that,
But do you fuse the 2 layers of wool first before
do.
you?
So the back here, your base,
Yeah.
the foundation piece that you're putting all of your stuff on, has soft fuse on the back.
Yeah.
So when I'm ironing my pieces onto this piece, I keep the paper on the back. When I start to stitch, that's when you peel the paper off and you start to stitch.
Right.
So that, all my knots are behind this, you know, but now I
Oh.
still have a fusible side, and then I just iron the back
Put the
onto
other-
it. Yeah.
There's another
oh, then you
back
put
on
that,
here.
the second part on.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought
Yeah.
you were kind of missing that, I thought, oh,
Yeah,
that's
no,
pretty
you
cool,
can
because I was looking.
sort of feel the knots
Yeah.
in between.
Yeah, oops, oops.
So it is fused.
And when you, and so the other thing I did, if I can get this off. When I'm stitching my back to the front and I want to hide my knots, so there are 2 layers. So I will, if I'm starting to stitch, I don't know what color it was, probably the green, I would put my needle in between the 2 and just catch a little bit of it. Because when you're doing a blanket stitch, you want to be on the outside and not on the front side, because that's the only way you're going to get that little bit that goes over the top here. I'll pass this one around here and make it go. And then I just kind of, sometimes when you're handling them a lot, especially these little ones, some of it will come away, especially around the bottom. And I was really happy on one of them, because the black one, because I forgot to sew those little feathery red things on the bottom, that feather stitch on the bottom. I went, oh good, I can just go in there and sew it and iron the piece back on.
And are you actually tucking a little bit under each edge, so you're actually,
My loose bit of thread, yes, it will
so
go
it's being
underneath.
tucked under?
Yeah.
And so you're actually stitching on a bit of a fold?
Yes, well, it's not really a fold, it's between
But
the,
it's not the raw edge. This is like around the outside of this snowman.
oh, there.
Is it the raw edge, or is it tucked under a little bit in your?
No, it's not tucked under at all. It's ironed onto here, so I don't have this back on yet. So I'm coming from the backside, and then I'm just doing my whip stitch all the way around it. And then I did the details
So
later.
this white was ironed
Onto the green background, yes.
So you ironed the gray on first.
Yeah.
Then you iron the white on
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
And then you iron each of the different colors on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then you go through afterwards to do your stitching?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I get it all ironed in place first, and then I do my stitching. And, lost my train of thought. So the broom handle here, I just used a stem stitch, but one strand of it is way too thin. So you wanna go really close to it and do a second one. And it just gives you a better look. You can see the broom handle here. And same with the nose, it's kind of a satin stitch. And what I would do is 2 straight stitches and then go side to side and just fill it in. Because that's an awfully tiny piece of wool, you know, so it's easier to stitch those embellishments on.
So do you trace your pattern onto your background, or you just kind of wing it?
So that little piece that I sent around that was soft fuse, that's what I'm tracing it on. And and so you can see that some of that's coming away. So this is my adhesive right here, it's just a really fine film, and that's why your pieces stay soft. With heat and bond, it's a much thicker adhesive, and so your pieces will be stiff. So if your pattern does not say on it reversed, then you have to reverse it. And the way you reverse it is put it up against a window and trace it on the backside, and then it's reversed. Most of Buttermilk Basin is reversed. Crane Design, which is this one, and there's another one out there, Maple Sugar Shack. Crane does not reverse her pattern, so you really do have to reverse those, otherwise things are going the wrong way, such as this one.
Here's maple sugar.
Yes, this is Maple Sugar Shack. I will be kitting this one up again. It is a little pricier, it's bigger, that's why, and there's a lot of wool in it. And with that one too, I used the dark blue Osnaburg. This stuff's gorgeous because it's hand dyed. So you're getting a lot of movement in your, so this is that's what it looks like.
Can I just touch to your Osnaburg?
Yes.
Because I'm just thinking, what makes it so special? Could I not use just a cotton or?
It's a looser weave, almost like a canvas, but much looser than a
And would you
canvas.
wash this before you use it, or does it matter?
I wouldn't, well, I mean, if I was gonna end up washing the
You don't wash
thing,
anything.
I don't wash anything,
Tell them the
no. I save that stuff for somebody else, step rather.
I just wanted to kind of get a feel for it, because I want to know what it felt like. 'Cause
Yeah,
How many people actually wash that?
That's really pretty.
if it was something that I would need to wash in the future, then I would wash it, because something like that, the dye might come out. That's what I would think.
And also
But-
how it's gonna be used, like someone gave me a tea towel and they put this lovely thing on, and the first time I watched it, it shrunk by 4.5 inches, which is a lot.
And that's probably why Sherry said to me, did you wash that?
Yeah.
So,
Because it's like,
and that
it's the
that is a
fabric that
looser
you're
weave.
using.
Yeah. I wash everything in cold water anyway, but I do throw them in the dryer, so,
Exactly.
you know, this might shrink.
Or just go out west where they got all the snow and.
Yeah, that's it. Just call Manitoba. Some of that time. Apparently it melted really fast the next day, yeah.
But all the lines.
Yeah. In this one, I should probably change it down.
That's what I was thinking.
So I have the pattern for this one, but this is the large. So the blocks are going to be, I think they're 10 inches. But with this one, when I quilted it, I used a friction pen in here to draw my design, how I was going to quilt it. And it was a pink one, so it's getting better. But
I know that
it
feeling.
would not come out. The pink would not come out. So use white, but it would have been hard to see. Actually, it looks like I used blue because I do see it here. I wonder though if that's a friction pen. Friction pans are great because they will iron out or it'll come back in the cold. So, but once you wash it, it's gone for good. So, this was one of the first kits we did as well. And this was one of my primitive classes as well. So this pattern will get you a really big one, but I suppose if you wanted it smaller, scan it in, make it smaller, and then do it. Yeah, I just really wanted to mention watch your markers, because sometimes it's really hard to get them out. I find that I love the bow and pencil, but the pink lead is really hard, and yellow lead as well is hard to get out. Don't use those. Any other questions? What else? This is the Roxanne's glue base. So, there's a pin in there. So it comes in two ways. This is like a little dabber, and this is perfect for just little areas where, that corner's coming up, but I really don't want to put a big dollop on it. These are great. So there's two kinds there. Also, we have a sale on right now. It's 20%, I believe, off on the wool scrap bags. There's lots more out there. There's lots more downstairs. Same with these. All of the wool is 20% off like this. I think it's patterns. Not any of these, because I just can't keep them in stock fast enough. This is what I do on the weekend. I take it home and cut them up. And I believe the Baldani thread is on sale. Oh, and this one here, because I taught that class twice, I had to do another row. So it's the very first row, exactly the same, only different colors for houses and things. I turned it into a bed runner. I thought, what am I going to do with two of them? But I had to have something that I could work along with and show them how to do it. So it looks great on the bed. So, it's another idea of things to do. I can't think of anything else. This little tree skirt was in Primitive Quilts and Projects. So it's a great magazine. Comes out 4 times a year. What was that, sorry? Primitive Quilts and Projects. This was a pattern in the magazine. It's a good magazine. They have.
Tree runner.
Pardon me?
Never mind, I know now.
Oh, okay.
So what you do with it.
I thought it looked like a little collar. For a very skinny neck. For Barbie.
It's Barbie.
Yeah. A lot of these are from previous years. I think they started out with these little mason jar type ones. I don't know if you can see them, sorry. And then I think the next, actually with that gray one, I believe this was one of them. Oh, she's got them all on here. And there's a globe.
Yeah, we see the sand
Oh, it's
slope on
on
this side.
Okay, yeah. So, and these are the ones that I used heat and bond in. So you can see how much stiffer they are. This one too is stiff. And that one. And with this one, I had a fabric I really liked. This blue with it looks like snow, right? So that's where I did it as I think this one actually has, what's that called?
Interfacing?
It is an interfacing, it's the Kathy Wiley, sill something. It's a heavier interfacing, and you use glue to put your, fabric on and you wrap it around. Marilyn, do you remember the name of it? Anyway, I don't like it, so don't use that method. Use the soft fuse or even the SF 101. What else? Oh, this, we had this little pattern. So this is Osnaburg, this background is Osnaburg. It's the natural, but I tea dyed it. And when you tea dye, the longer you leave it in, the darker it gets. If you use a cranberry tea, then you're gonna get pink. And so sometimes you need pink for a face. So, you know, whatever color you want, that's what you get. And this guy, this is made from wool, but you could also do this with flannel. And again, I didn't like the way she did the bottom in the book. She had you sew all the way around, cut a slit in the back, fill it up, and then just stitch that up. How ugly would that be? So I thought, well, I'll just cut out a front, I'll cut out a back, I'll cut out the oval, and then I'll just pinch it together and stitch it. And it sits upright, you know. I also have a little bit walnut shells. Yeah. The body is mostly the polyester film, I should say.
Polyester.
And then a bit of walnut shells in the bottom. And I just put it in a baggie, I think, and put it in. And I love it. So does my granddaughter. Okay, yes.
Very nice.
I have a motley collection of wool fabric from various sources. Is there anything I should be doing with that first before I use it? Like felting it or washing it?
When you felt it, it gets thicker. So depending on how you want it to look, some of the pieces that I have had, they have been felted and they're quite thick. So it's going to give you a different look. There is also suiting wool, which is so much thinner. But there's also some wools that are textured wools that are looser weave. So those definitely you want to use the SF 101 on, because when you stitch, if you don't have anything on it, then they're just going to fray out. If this is wool that you've had for a long time and you're not sure if there's bugs or anything in it, put it in the freezer.
Oh.
Yeah, and keep it in the freezer for a couple of days, that'll kill everything. You can wash it after that, cold water, use woolite. If you throw it in the dryer, it's going to melt up, yeah. So you could just lie it flat to dry, but you just wanna make sure there are no bugs in it. And if it's something you bought at a secondhand store, like an old skirt or something that's wool, you've got to either put it in the freezer or wash it, because if there was any food dropping on it, that's what the bugs like, so.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, how many will I see in my wool class next month? Wool class. I run a wool class once a month. It's not a club class, so it's $29 for the afternoon, 1 to 4. It is the second Friday usually of the month. In December, it's going to be the first, because I have 4 classes I have to teach before Christmas. So, yeah, they're always on a Friday afternoon. And,
Did you bring any project or?
Anything at all, yeah. You know, these kits are perfect because they're small and you can get most of that done in that class. The bigger ones, like even the pillow, what I ask that you do if you're gonna come to that class is have all your pieces traced on the soft fuse, let's not get that mixed up. that way, and also pick the wool that you want to go with whatever you're doing. And you can iron it onto your wool already. But when you, I had those little pieces of this soft fuse. So when you trace it, you don't want to cut it right on that line when you're cutting it out. You want to leave about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So see here, I just, actually this was a leftover piece I had, and I thought I was going to change the ball and the white one. It fit, so I used it. But leave about 1/8 of an inch all the way around, iron that onto your wool, and then when you cut it out, that's where you're gonna cut on the line. Because that way you'll have a nice clean cut, and it'll be the shape that you want. So if you don't iron it onto your wool, as long as it's traced on here, that just saves you time in class. Because then we can iron it onto your wool in the class, cut it out, iron it onto your background, and start stitching. And so you would bring to class a kit or whatever project you're working on. Bring your threads that go with it. I really like the embroidery floss if I don't have a wool. We do sell wool thread, 12 weight, but I don't have tons of colors. So depending on what you're sewing, you would bring that in. And then the needles, which are, oh, one other thing I absolutely love. I'll show you. Let's just move this over here. When you're working with small pieces, tweezers are your best friend. I don't know if you like me, but I don't get manicures very often, and so I have dry, flaky skin just around the nails. But that will catch the fibers in your wool and move your piece constantly. So tweezers, and especially these bent type, the ones that I have are, they're in here. Oh, this is another really good thing. This one, there's a lot of stitches in here, all the different kinds of stitches for embellishing. And these scissors are the best. These are Tim Holtz, and these are Karen K. Buckley. What's nice about these scissors is they have a serrated edge, so when you're cutting, it just really holds your fabric in place. So these are my tweezers, and the bent ones are better than the straight ones, just because it's easier to pick the piece up and then just get her in place, put your iron down. Of course, you wouldn't do it like that, but I mean, you know what I mean. What else?
What did you say, the 8 needles were embroidered, what were the 10 needles?
No, the chenille is a 24.
chenille.
Yeah, and the other is a number 8 embroidery.
And the class again, your once a month thing?
My
Just again?
first one is November.
It's the
Is it
first,
November?
actually.
It'll be the second, oh, you have a calendar, okay, I think it's the
So it's
second
like the first-
Friday.
So it's the second Friday, so it's the 8th.
Yeah. Wait a minute. But, yeah, the 8th sounds familiar. Yeah, it's the 8th.
8th.
I'll double check it out there, but it's, I'm sure it's the 8th. And then on
In the
the
afternoon.
Tuesday is when I have the punch needle, yeah. It follows the next week. Yes, in the afternoon, 1 to 4. And you come as many times as you want, or just come the one time, you know. Some of the ladies, they just, it's a social hour, right? So. So these little guys are all here. This one, I have 10 kits cut, no patterns. And this one, I designed, and I'm taking orders for it. It's a little gnome. Marilyn sent me not you, Marilyn. Marilyn Rayner, who works there, she said, do you have anything with gnomes on it? They're huge this year. I see them everywhere. So I thought, well, I could do something up. So yeah, I did a little gnome. So we will be kitting. Do you want one? I think I have a board where we're taking names. So they're fun. Oh, and the one thing I didn't do here, I haven't sewn around my edges yet. So I'll go around and show you. So see how there's two, the back and the front. So when I am going to do my blanket stitch, I will come in here and I'll just sort of catch this because I want to be on the outside here to do the blanket stitch.
And you'll go red here.
I'll go red where it's red
Yeah.
and then gray on the other. And when I use a wool thread, you're not really going to see that, so it's kind of, yeah. And after I did it, I thought, oh, he looks like Santa Claus. I wasn't aiming for that, but he does. So this is where I was saying, so you have a front and the back, so this is not sticking very well. All I would do is just press it again, but I would sew first because that way it allows me to sort of catch this without going all the way through, and that way my thread comes up on the outside and then I can carry on with the blanket stitch. But that's what you want to do, because you don't really want to have knots on the back.
Oh, this isn't.
And so you can, this is just,